Okay.
Fantastic. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining number 2 in a series of 5, specializing in marketing and making sure really that everybody gets information on how to reboot. I mean, that's the strapline that I've seen floating around at the moment. Businesses in a sort of post-pandemic environment. We're honoured this morning to be joined by John Sinclair from Lowman Miller. So John is going to demystify everything to do with how you define a marketing strategy, which, as we were saying pre the call, is the one thing that people typically overlook. They just jump straight to social media, put a nice picture up, put something up they think is compelling, and send it out without the background about why you're doing it to begin with. So with that, questions in the chat or direct at John. We should have time at the end to answer a few questions as well, so please don't feel that you can't interrupt during the process. I'll monitor the chat. If there are any questions in there, John, I'll probably interrupt, if that's okay.
Yep.
And with that, I shall hand over to yourself.
Okay, thank you, Ollie, and thank you, Sadie, for allowing me the opportunity to present today. So as I say, we're going to talk about strategy. In a minute, I'm going to share the screen and set up the presentation. As I say, if you have any questions, feel free to just ask during, but there's going to be plenty of time at the end and stuff. Take lots of notes. I can give you the slides to share at the end of the meeting as well, if you wish. So just obviously, if you send an email over to Ollie or Sadie, and then I can send them over. So on that basis. So, okay, so let's do the technical bit and share the screen. Okay, so can everyone see that?
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, so okay, so what we're going to do today is obviously talk about your marketing strategy, and it's what we look at and say, well, what is 3 steps to a marketing strategy? Okay, so first of all, before we take a look at the 3 steps, let's look at what is a strategy. Basically, from your sales to finance and production to human resources, your marketing strategy allows your organization to use resources available in the best way possible to gain market share and outperform your competition. And often people mistake a marketing strategy for a marketing plan, or worse still, a marketing to-do list. Marketing touches every corner of your business, from the usual suspects in sales, all the way through to human resource, customer service, production, delivery, and even finance. How your organization operates and communicates internally and externally all determine how successful your business will be to achieve its goals. So before we go into what is a marketing strategy and how to create one, let's look at what a marketing strategy isn't. So, the list above is just some of the things that people might say if you ask them about their marketing strategy. They tell you about the tactics of their marketing plan. This is not a strategy. If you imagine about going traveling and you want to go to New York City to see the Statue of Liberty, you have a timescale, which is the next 6 months, and the budget is £300 per person. Your strategy is how you're going to get there and have the best experience and the most efficient times, spending only what you need. You will likely need to drive to the airport, catch a flight to New York City. You might use a subway to get to your hotel, and a bus or a taxi to take you to the boat where you'll start your tour. The only way you know what modes of transport to use and in what order is because you had a plan in place in the first place. Marketing tactics are the modes of transport. So you might use them, all of them, and you might use some of them. How you choose to use them and how you choose to integrate them depends on what you're trying to achieve or where you need to go to. You can't decide the tactics until you have a plan in place. And you can't decide on a plan until you have a strategy. So, marketing strategy covers everything from what you're taking to market to what the market is, how to create a proposition that they will buy, what price point they will buy at, how they'll be able to buy, and how they are nurtured through the sales process. What happens to them as they go through the well-defined process of research, elimination, consideration, and decision. And most importantly, what happens once they become a customer. People believe that marketing starts where you have a message to send out to a database or some content to add on social media, and ends when the inquiry is sent to the sales team. So long as it's pretty creative and has a call to action, job done. Worse still, people decide these plans based on what they think they know about the market or what their competition is doing. They assume and estimate based on experience and supposition. The reality is that marketing never stops. It's an integral part to the sales process, and it's integral to the recruitment process. It supports after sales and gives power to the onboarding process that enlivens customer service. So let's look at how we grow a business. So the single part of any business is to be profitable, and that requires us to sell and ensure that we can do this as profitable as possible. Therefore, marketing's job is to assist sales and ensure customer journey from stranger to fan is seamless and enjoyable process. And there are three ways to grow a business. The first way is to get more customers. This is what everyone kills themselves trying to achieve 90% of the time, and most people spend most of their money in this area. And number two, it's get your existing customers to spend more by upsell, cross-sell, increase what we call their average basket spend. So if you give an example, if a retailer has 1,000 customers a week spending on average £10 per transaction, that's £10,000 a week. If each customer spend is only 10% more per transaction, which is £1, turnover has just increased by £1,000 without actually having to find a single new customer. Number three, get your existing customers to spend more often. If they buy monthly, an additional purchase per month, increasing turnover is much the same way as number two. Yet we still haven't had to go to find any new customers. And great examples of this is for number two is we've all been to McDonald's, we order our lunch, and they always say to you, do you want to go large for the extra, however 50 pence that it is to go large on the meal. And then obviously on the subscription services where you look at in number three, you get those periods of areas where they'll give you extra services that you can add on for an extra £5 or an extra £1 a month or so on and so forth. And before long, your subscription of £25 is now 150. So this is a great way of how you increase customer base and increase your business without actually finding new business. Okay. So key parts of a marketing strategy. So as you can see, you first have to understand the business goal. And it is the good old cliche. Where do you want to be in 5 years' time? If you want to sell your business in 5 years' time, your strategy is going somewhat different to what it would be as if you want to launch a new product in 5 years' time. So what is the goal for 5 years? Be clear, be specific. The second step is to identify your market, not in a generic and broad way, but specifically, who is the customer? Why do they buy? What are their pain points? What are their objections? Who else is part of the decision-making process? And don't guess, don't assume, really take a look and really understand what that is. Based on who the customer is, what is your positioning, your proposition, and your price point? Sometimes these things are predefined, but you need to sense check this. Companies often start to fail when they don't revisit these key points. And just because you knew these answers 5 years ago doesn't mean it's now the same now. Is your proposition compelling? Is it relevant? Is it fairly priced? You don't have to be the cheapest, but you do have to be value for money. If you think of stories of the likes of Netflix and Blockbuster and how they changed and what they failed, Blockbuster failed to move their business forward because they didn't believe in streaming a video. All of a sudden, what happened? Well, there's only one Blockbuster store left in the world now, and it's more of a novelty than anything else. Sorry, I lost my words there. So next, what is their buying journey? How do they research? How do they evaluate? Who do they check in with? What is their emotional state at each stage of this journey? Are they looking for confidence, kudos, a bargain? Do you need to know what you're messaging? And indeed, your chosen medium for communication, are they apt and are they relevant? If you think about that, if you're dealing with a person that is 60 plus, would they be looking at social media or would they be looking at a newspaper or a magazine advert? It's just that case of process. People often make the mistake of trying to sell too much at any one stage of the buyer journey. And I'm sure all of us here have got experience of having that email come in our inbox that tries to sell us something straight away. Or we have a connection on LinkedIn and the first thing they do once they've connected is send you a message offering their services. If I don't get 10 of those a day, I feel like I'd something missed out. So if I sell widgets, the purpose of my ad is to get people to visit my website. The purpose of my website is to get people to make an inquiry where I can follow up. The purpose of the follow-up is to make an appointment to sell. The appointment is my chance to sell a demo, and the demo sells the widget. Yet how many times are people trying to sell widgets on ads? Who's had experience of that? Anybody?
No.
No. Wow. That's interesting. Okay, so this is the 3 areas that we look at when we put the methodology together for ourselves and how we approach it with our customers. But generally, this is the kind of fundamental of how it should work. So each of these 3 areas is a strategy in its own right, and collectively they form the marketing strategy for the business. This strategy is not limited to 12 or even 24 months, but as long as required to reach the goal. Remember, a marketing strategy is not a marketing plan. Plans help deliver strategies. So where is the greatest opportunity for the quickest success? Marketing is not a quick fix, but remember, it may be easier to sell to existing customers while you develop lead generation strategy, which will take time to deliver results. So this is where we talk about it's not a quick fit, a quick opportunity in and out to do it for 3 months and it'll be fine. This is an ongoing, consistent process. The key part to your strategy is how you will deliver this, and it's not the tactics. They will come later. And this is the systems, processes, and software that hold this all together. What is the sales process? Where and how does marketing support? What can be automated? What is the onboarding process? Where are the opportunities to leverage the relationship or create new sales opportunity? What is the lead nurturing process? Can you track your prospect interactions? Ultimately, what underpins any marketing strategy is good software through systems and processes. These create data and insights, which feeds back into the strategy. Look at your business, look at your goals. What is the most effective route to help you get to stage 1 of your goals? And where is your greatest opportunity? And if you start there, you won't go wrong. Okay, so some tips. The most successful strategies are born when people take the time to understand the most efficient way for them to achieve their goals. Is it new customers, increased spend, or increased frequency? And what that means for them in terms of delivery is it a new offering to the same market, the same offering to a new market, or a new offering to a new market? And the keys to remember here are here. Number 1, the market is always big enough for you to create space. Number 2, who the customer isn't is as important as who the customer is. And number 3, be clear about your offering and solve your pain point. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So one example is Nintendo Wii. So we've all heard of Nintendo Wii. When they originally came to market with the game box of Nintendo Wii, one of the challenges they had, the marketplace was already heavily congested with Xbox and PlayStation. And also one of the challenges was the typical person that was playing those games was a male, average 15 to 35 years of age, and they tended to want driving games, shoot 'em up games, war games. You know the whole story of that sort of area there. And at the same time, they were already in a price war of who had the cheapest or the best product out there. So Nintendo came about it and said, what can we do? So what they did was they found space. They created their own space with the Nintendo Wii. They then looked at who their customer wasn't. Well, their customer wasn't 15 to 35-year-old male that wants to play single occupancy shoot 'em up games. They decided to focus on families, making it together. Be clear about your offering and solve the pain point. They did. What they did was they got everyone off the sofa and not being inclusive. They got everybody off the sofa and being active. So we've all done the games where we've knocked out the LCD TV with either bowling a little bit too much or doing the golf swing a little bit in the front room. And we've all taken mum's ornaments off. So these are the areas of what they did. So if you remember the advertising campaigns, it was all about mum and dad, grandpa, kids getting up, playing the game. And very, very quickly, they actually created a market for themselves. And what happened? Very soon after that, Xbox and PlayStation started to create some versions of their own games very after, because they'd missed a trick. And that's classically how you would create what we would call a blue ocean strategy. And when you look at things like red ocean and blue ocean is where everybody's fighting each other for the business. If you can find a way where there's a blue ocean, where there's nobody there, where it's not contested, that's the best way to get in there. So another example of this is a company called Yellowtail. Now we've all heard of Yellowtail. They're an Australian wine producer. And one of the challenges they had is they were coming into a marketplace where wine was very talked about. There was a certain wine snobbery of how you buy wine and the complexities of it and the complexity of the purchase. They realized they couldn't compete in that marketplace because they didn't have the pedigree of Italy or France or some of the other areas in the world where they're famous for producing. But what they could do was they decided to talk to the marketplace that sold beer, cocktails, and the general public. And they created a price point. So what they did was to make it fun and adventurous. And their story is very, very classic of that, how they differentiate themselves from the market. They made it really simple for you to buy a bottle of wine. They created good creative branding around that product and made it fun and adventurous to choose. And they're just a couple of examples of how you create space, who the customer is, and be clear about your offering and solve their pain points. Okay, so delivery. Aside from the mechanics of who will design the website, who will write the copy, who will manage your social media, there are more fundamental questions to ask. So, number one, sales team, marketing team, what about HR? Who is responsible for after sales or onboarding? Who deals with the customer service inquiries? Who deals with complaints? Are these people aware of the strategy? Do they know what your goal is and how you're going to achieve it? One of the classic things here is HR is the classic area that gets missed, is because they'll look at HR and go, well, I just need a salesperson. Well, yes, you do need a salesperson for your sales team, but you need a salesperson that interacts with your strategy, understands your branding, and is the right fit, not just a salesperson in the same industry that sold the same stuff in a different way. Because if you're looking at a different route, you need a different type of salesperson. So this is a classic example of where it can go wrong. Number two, are the people above aware when their role starts and when it ends? Do they know what part they play in the customer journey and who they need to be interacting and communicating with? Is it clearly mapped out? This is a classic example where you get the sales team are always blaming the marketing team, and they're probably right, because the marketing probably aren't supporting them in the right ways. And we've heard this time and time again, where they just won't, one doesn't understand the other. And this is always a classic misconception. Number three, are your sales team individuals aware of the value of each lead? Are they aware of how and where to follow up? Can automation or marketing help there? Is there a clear understanding from the marketing journey, sales journey, to which identifies who is responsible and when and how each can support the other's role? And we always talk, in number four, we always talk of return on investment. We talk of measurability, but what does it actually mean? Do you know what data you need to be monitoring? Do you know what you need to be measuring? This is all linked back to goals. If your goal of an email campaign is to get people to pick up the phone, why are you measuring the open rate? Who cares about the click-through rate? If 20 people clicked and no one phoned, the activity failed. Be honest about what you're measuring. Common misconception with social media. Everybody gets the hype and they look at it and go, wow, I've got 10,000 fans, or I've got this, and it's that. It's like, it's actually the important thing is who's engaging with you, who's communicating. They are the important pieces of the marketing and to show whether it's working or not. Number five, proper strategies need proper tools for delivery. It shouldn't be hard work. It should feel like common sense. And these are the systems, processes, and software. Okay, so that's pretty much the whole presentation in a whole. Got through it rather quickly. Does anybody have any questions or talk in general about what they're currently doing? Any problems they're doing at the moment that they want to actually, share out to the room, and I might be able to shed some ideas on how they can help point themselves forward. So over to you, Ollie. Have you got any questions or anybody?
Everybody a few seconds to come off mute.
That's cool.
Does anybody have a specific question that they want to drill into? Okay.
Right.
So on that basis, John, it's worth talking about the persona mapping, because, systematically, whenever you look at any form of marketing strategy, you've got to understand who your audience is.
Yeah.
Your buying strategy. It's not a one size fits all. As a business, we've got 5 personas that we've mapped against, and it's about what are their pain points, what's the value proposition, and what are their motivators. when you typically engage with a business, is that something you'll try to help them uncover? Because a lot of the time, as a business owner, you don't necessarily know all of your customer pain points, right?
Yeah, it's true. It's a common thing that when you talk to anybody, one of the common things I do when I meet people is I say, so who is it you sell to? And the common answer is everybody. And you think, well, that's not true in reality, because if you take an interior design company, yes, they want Mavis to come in the door with her cushion. She wants her cushion knitting, but realistically, they want the £500,000 house that wants all the curtains, all the thing. And so you get the two examples of the two, and you sell differently. Now, it doesn't mean to say what happens a lot of the time when you look at the buyer persona, businesses get worried because they think, well, if I sell to that marketplace, will I miss out on this? The irony is they'll come anyway. So it's just that they will always come in the door. You'll always have that factor. So that the important thing of really fine tuning down who you sell to, and we go about this with the process of, you look at people and you say, right, so we'll give them a persona of a name. So it might be Sally C-suit, and that might be you're selling to female CEO types, tech types, or graphic designers, or it might be you're selling to builders. So you look at those areas, but then you might be selling, say, if you take builders, for instance, there's different types. You've got your one-man band builders that are very job on the job. You've also then got the ones that have a business that were originally builders and are now more managing directors of a building business. Again, both of them have two different forms of communication of where you need to link to. So does that help with that?
Yeah, it does. I think as well, as part of that process, so once you've mapped out your buyer personas, the other thing as well, which a lot of people think is, right, we've got the holy grail of a marketing strategy because we've sat down, we've mapped out our buyer personas, we know what the customer journey looks like, we know how to onboard customers, we know where they hang out and what they do, and they've gone through all of this and they've come up with their strategy. But one thing that they fail to do is acid test it. And by that, what I mean is you learn as you sell more product, as you get more involved with people, as you discover new things, you should always be prepared to go back and move those personas around, because invariably they change. The whole market changes, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had a classic example of that a few years ago now. We did a research campaign for a client, and their marketplace was very heavily impacted by 3D printers. And they didn't realize it at all. So when they looked at it, they're their typical customer. And also, they were traditionally heavily selling into the engineering world to produce models. And they were selling most of their marketing was in newspaper, in classic types of advertising, and not looking that actually their buyers had actually changed. The age group of the buyer had actually reduced down to under 30. So now all of a sudden they didn't realize and recognize that difference. So again, it was the process that had changed. So two areas that it changed there. So it very much is. And to be honest, if you've got no business has an infinite amount of marketing budget. Even in the big, massive companies, they still have a finite amount of marketing that they want to achieve their goals with. But if you fine tune your customers, you can spend more in the right area. And that's the thing we always get on. If you try and go broad, the problem with broad is you spread everything thin. So if you focus it down to one or two, and it might be that as a goal, you want probably there's 10 personas that you want, but you don't have that budget, then fine. Just focus on two. Yeah.
Yeah. And on that basis as well, that goes back to the red and blue oceans, right?
Yeah.
Because ultimately you're looking for that sweet spot within a market. There's a question in the chat, which is from Alistair, which is that many businesses are small enterprise that don't have the resources. What advice can you give to this group in terms of sitting down and almost sort of a project plan of how to come up with a strategy?
So it's one of the great things for me, and something I'm a fan of, is read books, get knowledge, find market research, and there's ways you can do that yourself. The fantastic thing that we're looking into today with the internet gives us a huge, vast area of research that we can find in areas. Now, I understand that you don't have a budget. First thing to do is establish how much you can afford to spend. And I do this all the time with clients that probably aren't our ideal clients, and they say, well, we don't have the budget for this. And I say, okay, so DIY it then. Do something yourself, but then get the specialist in to look in a specific area. So where an example of this is, if you don't know how to create your marketing strategy, bring someone in to do the strategy, and then use them as and when to how to deliver it, to map it all out. If you don't know or understand social media, get someone in to just post it. If you're happy with doing the work, then you do the work. But what you need to do is ask yourself a serious question. It's okay you saying you're doing it as a small business, but are you going to do it? That's the key thing. And I will always argue that marketing works when it's consistent. Even bad marketing works when it's consistent. If you're consistently doing it enough, you will get some results. They might not be the results you want, but you'll get results. So, spend the money where you can. Focus in a few key areas. Nowadays, I always say to smaller businesses, focus on 3 areas. Your website, make sure you can spend as much as you can on your website. Make sure you get that working. Focus on one social media channel. Do not try and master them all, because, I'll give you an example. Who here has heard of Burberry? Hands up, who's heard of Burberry? Do you know how big their social media team is? 300 people are in that social media department. And they all have, I think there's like 20 in each person's social media. So it just gives you a clue of how different the world has now become. So focus on one. Facebook's always the classic medium because, let's face it, it has the broadest age spectrum. Nowadays it's 20 plus to 50, 60-year-olds understand and probably have an idea of Facebook. Obviously, a younger generation in the room, they might look at Instagram or other areas. The techies might look at Twitter. Accountants love Twitter. I don't know why, but they love it. So, the techie world love Twitter. The web developers like Twitter. So there's just different areas of look. Also, look at who your customer is and look at where they're most likely to interact. And that area. So, and then the other third thing is look at your sales and look at following up. My theory about following up is I follow up until 2 things happen. Either I die or they die. Simple. That's it. You keep continually following up. And then eventually they will come around. And marketing and sales together is just about familiarity. It's all about actually when you make something familiar. So if you're wanting to connect with someone on LinkedIn, start to be familiar. Don't just go straight in and ask for the pitch. I always do this analogy as if when you walk into a bar, a man or a woman walks into a bar and they see a handsome man or a gorgeous woman sat at the bar. You don't walk straight up to them and say, hey, will you marry me? First of all, you might, find a way to work up to the bar. Then you might ask a few questions. You might buy them a drink. You might go out. So it's that classic thing is think about how you can interact. So on social media, you might think, well, actually, I'll comment on a few of their posts. I'll follow their business. I'll celebrate stuff and then go for the connection. So that's a simple way, but it doesn't cost any money to do it.
And on that basis as well, John, social media itself is, where does your audience hang out? And there's an interesting shift in probably in the last 12 to 18 months, actually, that strictly, if you rewound back 2 years, LinkedIn was very much B2B, Facebook was very much consumer, Twitter was very much geeky and techie, right? And Instagram was very visual for obvious reasons. However, over the last 18 months, there's been a shift, certainly on Facebook, to becoming more B2B. And that's really based on the fact that anybody that's on LinkedIn typically has a Facebook profile as well. And there was a lack of B2B activity on Facebook. So those kind of early adopters could double down and get their message across very quickly and easily. Do you think in today's world, and you're saying, and I'm totally with you on this point, by the way, which is, focus on the social media platforms where your owners are. Facebook seems to be the only one that transcends B2B, B2C, and also techie at the moment. It seems to be that one social media platform that seems to do all of the different personas. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, totally. I mean, the great thing about Facebook, although it's going to have some challenging times ahead over the next 18 months, but one of the great things about Facebook, for a start, it's been in the marketplace the longest. Yeah, so it has the widest reach of people. But also, just when you sit and look at Facebook, you look at how it's now an engine that needs to be profitable. So it makes ad campaigns more profitable and cheaper to do. So, their battle with Google, for instance, is they're trying to get ad spend onto their platform. So they're trying to take it away from Google. So they're making it more cost effective for businesses to advertise outside of the medium. So what they'll do, likewise, they were trying to do video. If everyone remembers when Facebook video and live stream came out, the reason that happened, and for a while, whoever in your fan base, the videos were automatically showed to 100% of your fan base. And the reason this is because they're trying to battle with technically Google, but YouTube, as to how many hours of video was played on a platform, because again, they're trying to draw ad revenue away from that. So, and that's one of the classic examples of where you look at why Facebook is going up another level and it's working itself that way. However, it's got a few challenges coming. So, so with that, but yeah, generally it's probably the best one and easiest one to get your head around and work. And even if you're B2B, one of the great things to think about Facebook is you might think my customer isn't on Facebook, but the people who work for them are. And those people might be influencers in that business. If you ideally you want to get past receptionists and you sell office equipment, if you're telling someone about how bad their photocopier is, you can guarantee it'll be the people who do the office work will be the ones that will go, yeah, that's really bad. And actually, they're the ones that might forward this message and say, by the way, boss, have you thought about this? So it's just a clear example there.
And just to add to that as well, I mean, there's 2.7 billion users on Facebook. And ultimately, Facebook's MO is to get more eyeballs on screens. That's all they want to do because that's more ad revenue. But there are some additional resources, things like setting up groups. As a business, we have a Facebook group. It's a closed group, and it's there where our kind of community share ideas and get involved with each other. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be that your marketing is an outbound advert. It can also be thought leadership within your space. And realistically, I mean, we touched on Seth Godin, but he wrote a book 12, 13 years ago, which was called Tribe. Right. And the whole idea is that you have to form a tribe, and social media is very much tribes. So, in that respect, and it doesn't mean that Facebook's always the right place. LinkedIn has groups too, but certainly when you start to try and build communities out on these platforms, you're not directly marketing, but you're also applying thought leadership. Is there much in the strategy that should dictate around thought leadership?
Absolutely, because I mean, obviously nowadays with thought leadership is key. It's been bandied around for several years that you should be a thought leader in your industry. And I'll just give you an interesting fact: is it's all about content. So it's the amount of content that you do. So if you stand there and your goal is to be a thought leader in your industry, has anybody any ideas how many pieces of content you need to put out a day to actually even just get a tip into being a thought leader? Any ideas? No one?
I'm going to say between 3 and 5 per day.
You need to be doing something at least every hour, a piece of content every hour. And that's not just a post, that'll be blogs, email, whatever the comms cycle that you're doing. If you truly want to establish thought leadership in your area, you've got to be firing. And that's because that's what the big boys are doing. The big boys at the end of the day are smothering the marketplace with everything. However, doesn't mean to say that locally you can't win, because you could be very clever at sharing posts and doing stuff. So you can do. But the great thing, what you mentioned about setting up groups, is if you generate groups on your social media, one of the great things you can do is you can get that community in there, get them to do their own content in that group. You have influence over it because you have control over it. But then all of a sudden you start to build up a user base, but you're not actually selling in it. Now, how many people are members of groups they've got rules at the top? You can't promote anything. This is just a helpful channel to group. However, The great thing about building an audience is you now have an audience in a private area that you can upsell to, you can utilize. And with your strategy, that would be key. You know, to just set one up and say, I want to set one up. You just need to think about who it is you want to be in that community, and then work towards that.
Are you not really mixing up business to consumer rather than business to business?
No, some of the most successful business to business campaigns actually work on Facebook, because let's say you're a recruitment agent, for argument's sake, and there might be some in the room today. So you're a recruitment agent that typically sells into businesses, but the influence of the people are on Facebook. So you've got that connection there. So it's easy to sort of, when you look at it was easy to say that when you look at retail, you look at retail as, oh, it's a very flashy and in your face, but there's very clever things that you could do behind the scenes. And it's just sometimes thinking about those strategies of where you come to, because let's face it, LinkedIn's full of recruitment agents and real estate agents, but no one actually sits and looks at the marketplace of Facebook.
So it's typical British service industry.
Yeah.
Not manufacturing.
So even if you looked at manufacturing, you can show the products. If you're trying to influence your end user. Now, we had a client recently, a few years ago now, but they actually did private manufacturing for main brands. So they oversourced what they did. So what they did was they sold named brands, but it was small production line runs. So we came up with a campaign so they influenced the end user. So what we did was we helped the wholesaler and the manufacturer sell to the end user who was using their product after it had gone to the wholesaler. So again, that was a B2B plan, but it was influencing the user. Does that make sense? Was it Mark who said that?
Yeah, not in relation to business, industrial business. But anyway, I'll let you carry on. It was just my...
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's another question as well in the chat, which is from IEP wholesalers. You know, as a wholesaler, are there any tips around, you know, that you would suggest? Any suggestions around marketing?
Yeah. So what is it they wholesale? Just as a quick one, if they want to come off mute. I think no.
The 5-second rule on this one.
5-second rule's fine unless you've got a 3-second dog, then it doesn't work. So
just home and giftware and aromatherapy items.
Yeah, so obviously you're the wholesaler and you're selling to. So one of the key things that always is a great way for wholesalers to use their marketing is if you help and support your customer. So if you use something where they actually will get benefit from by support, and we all hear about this in the largest perspective, but if you help your your customer sell to their customer, that will always help the processes out. And you'll see this a lot of time in the pet food world. You know, they'll come in and they will do demos. The manufacturer and the wholesaler will do demos in store for retail customers. So they will then help them sell their products in store. So that's a great way of looking at it. And it depends who you're selling who your customer is and what they're like. And that would be, for you guys, would be fine tuning down who the actual customer is. Are they a retailer that you want to sell into shops? Are they an online retailer? Are they an online reseller? Where it's at. So looking at your personas there would then identify where you could go. But definitely wholesale would be a really, really easy one to do, especially if they doing things like drop ship. Look at different areas and routes to market, how you can deliver the products out there. You know, there's lots of different routes you can deliver. Try not to think of the traditional route. If you may have a sales team that goes out and knocks on doors of retail shops, and there's certain retail shops, look at online, look at digital. This is the area where you could probably hugely maximize this. And, you know, you can help, if you help your customer become digitally aware, they're going to sell more of your products. So again, that's an area where you look to doing it. If you help them produce content, let's look at the room. If you've got suppliers who you work with, if they helped you with your marketing, would you not sell more of their products? Yeah, would you? You would, wouldn't you? If someone gave me money or gave me stuff to do, I'd do it. It would be a heartbeat. Would make sense. Did that help?
That's great, John. And there's just as well. And actually, there's a question from Gemma, which is a really good segue into this, which is, you know, where everybody trades off of their brand, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, and I've seen this from all sorts of different people, which is, you know, they change their brand every year, at least 3 times. They change the logo, the different strap line, and ultimately, you know, it takes probably the best part of 3 years for a brand to start to become familiar.
Yeah.
Is there any stats around, you know, or any thought guidance around the fact of building that brand and what you should really, you know, be focused on?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'll tell you a quick story. So everybody's heard of a brand called Coca-Cola. Yes. Anybody not heard of Coca-Cola? Yeah. 1984, some bright spark in the design and branding division decided to change their brand. In the first quarter, they lost $120 million of revenue. And that was just in the US, because if you remember, they changed the font to more typeset Romans, and then quickly they changed it back again. So branding is important. It's something that if you've got a small amount of budget, focus the time. But branding isn't just the fancy logo on the page. Branding is how you deliver it, what's the follow-up, what's the process. So if we had a recent example of a client that we were doing some work for, and unbeknown to us, somebody got bored and decided to change their brand. So we started delivering some of their products. They didn't tell us about this. And then we said, do you not think we need to do this? Oh, we just changed it on social media. Yeah, but we need to change the campaign. We've just printed a load of brochures for you that now have a different logo on. By the way, have you thought about your sign written van? Have you thought about all your follow-ups? Who's heard of a brand called Lush? Yeah. Do you know the best thing I love about Lush is when you buy it, you sit there, and not that I buy it for my wife, but you sit there and there's a lovely little sticker on it that says this was packed by Jose, and it's a little cartoon sticker. Yeah. And that's a brand. So it's not even talking about the brand itself. It's actually the little sticker on the thing, and it's the follow-up and the micro moments that every time you follow up. And this even works with the finance department. So if your branding goes through the system, how the words you say in the finance team depict on your brand, you know, and you've heard this of, if you look at Richard Branson in recent history, obviously he's the brand master, but he is the brand. Let's face it, you know, it's the cheeky chappy with the beard has just always been his brand, and that's what he's good. So when you look at your brand, yeah, take some time, spend some money, and actually, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, don't go out there and spend 10, 20,000 pounds on looking at your brand, but actually spend a couple of grand on it. Because how you deliver it will ask you questions. It will ask you questions. Well, what is our strategy? Well, we need to think of our strategy. Then we need to put this together. We need to know that if we do this logo and all our guys, if we're plumbers, for instance, and all the plumbers embroidery, and if the logo is so fancy and difficult, it doesn't actually fit on the t-shirt well, it looks horrible. That's important, because obviously the engineer that comes into the house, that's the bit that creates the branding. Even from the case of with builders are concerned, and I'm talking about builders a lot at the minute because I've got them in my house, but you know, if they actually came in with those little blue overshoes and put them on their boots, that's brand, because it talks differently about what everyone else is doing. So yeah, so hugely important.
So shifting gears slightly, and this is a personal topic and something I did for quite a long time, which is one of the big elements of a marketing strategy should be your competitive analysis. And in actual fact, I'm going to argue that before you get anywhere near social media or personas, you should have assessed the market and understand the market, numbers, sizes, all that good stuff. And as John said, that's already exists on the internet. But in terms of a competitive strategy, and this is quite interesting, everybody has the ability to compete, irrespective of the size of business. So you can be a small business in Cambridgeshire and compete with billion-dollar US businesses. You could be in retail and compete with Amazon. And actually, some of these competitive strategies are born out of where you want to be over a series of years and various other pieces. But just to give you an idea of two Goliaths swinging at each other in the US, and this came up on a call recently, is Walmart and Amazon. So Amazon were obviously gaining share on Walmart. Walmart noticed this. And so Walmart sat down and they did their own competitive analysis, their own SWOT analysis. And they've got something like 1,500 stores in the US. Amazon have no way near that amount of distribution points. So all of a sudden, Walmart said, if we do shuttle service from the store to people's houses, we can be there in an hour. So they're transforming their entire store model now to make their stores warehouses to be able to shuttle goods to you within an hour. And that's how they're trying to compete and rework their business to compete against Amazon. But in terms of when you get involved with businesses, what does that competitive story look like? How do you help them, so understand and shape their market?
Yeah, so one of the key things that, and I totally agree with you, looking at your competitors is always a great place to find loopholes, see what they're doing and how they're doing stuff. And that's probably an area where you'd spend your money with a professional. Get a competitor analysis done. Don't worry too much about depending on your market, don't worry too much about the entire field. Just pick 3. Just find 3 that you either want to emulate or look at as a competitor. And I would bear that down when you're looking at a competitor analysis, is actually saying, right, who have I lost business to recently? Yeah, that's, if you're a bookstore and Amazon, yes, Amazon's there, they sell books. But if you repeatedly losing business because ABC bookstore in the street is being beaten by XYZ bookstore in the street, focus there. Don't try and compete with the big boys, but there's no reason why with your competitor analysis, you can't use the big boys to help you. So definitely looking at competitors is really, really important, because it starts to identify whether you have a different offering, whether you're offering a service, or whether you're, look at our marketplace, the marketing world. Now, there's probably, I don't know in Peterborough now, I mean, I did a search about 10 years ago for marketing agencies in Peterborough, and there's probably 10, and I had to look hard to find them. Nowadays, there's probably about 2,000, and most of them are one-man bands that offer 17 different services. They do social media, they'll do email, they'll do content management, blog writing, websites, and everything. However, are they a competitor to us? No, because we've niched down the market. So if you turn around and you're sitting in there looking at your marketplace and thinking, actually, all these people I think are my competitors don't offer this service here, I'm just going to focus and specialize in that surface. And what happens is sometimes you may even find yourself another marketplace, because if they don't do it, there's probably a reason. But you do it because you've got the setup and the skill set to do it, then you can sell to them as well as an add-on service. So that's why in looking at competitors, sometimes you can find collaboration, which is really, really important.
I think as well, as a business owner or a business leader, you should know your competitors off by heart, not just, size of market, what they're doing, what their activity looks like, where they're moving, but also as well, back to your point, which is, okay, what can't they do? And as soon as you get into the world of what can't you do, you start to expose market. Now, if you compare that with, what's the size of market, where are people distributed, and all those good things, that's where you can find that blue ocean, because all of a sudden you find an untapped market that nobody's playing in. And actually, you'd be amazed at how seemingly small those markets will be until you start to uncover the surface. Today's business world is more competitive than it ever has been. Last year was a record year in new startups, although some of that would have been attrition as associated to COVID. It's not about the fact there is no business that can say they've got no competition, right? It's that straightforward. It's understanding where you want to compete that's actually the challenge.
Yeah, and as well, don't think because you're looking at a situation in an area of your marketplace that I won't offer those services. No, I'm very good at going into customers and talking to them about one thing. Because why? Because that gets me in the door. But then I turn around and say to them, well, we can do this for you, but before we do this, we need to do this. And then all of a sudden you've got your foot in the door. So now you're able to sell into them other products and services that you're no longer competing with the competition for, because you've already got the sale from something that the competition doesn't sell. So second sale is always easier than the first, every time. So and that's where the key thing is. So you just think smart, spend the time of thinking smart, going down to that one product that you can offer that no one else does. Once you're in the door, Then create your strategy that sells in all your other products. You know, and it might be a loss leader. We've all heard the foot in the door type techniques and loss leaders, but sometimes that's what you need.
And on that basis, John, it's just worth highlighting as well that, you know, again, you have to lay out the journey for your customers. It's not about, I've just made a sale, great, run for the door. You have to think about, what does that sale mean? How do I get my customers to value? What does that pathway look like? But also, what does the potential upsell look like along that journey as well? So you hopefully that kind of gives you a little bit of insight there, but it's not, a sale is not a transaction and you bail off. The onus is on you to provide the value, and the onus is on you to get through that journey, right?
Yeah, and it's quite easily sometimes, especially if you sell quite a pricey product, you automatically might assume, well, that customer doesn't need me anymore. But the thing is, that product might need servicing. That product might have a family. That family might have the same products. So if you can nurture campaigns and your marketing to look after those people, and then all of a sudden they start to say, oh, by the way, Mrs. Jones up the road, she wants take a boilers or whatever, but they want a new boiler. So it's very easy to think when you deal with a pricey item that once it's sold, I don't need to sell it for 5 years. Trust me, there's multiple opportunities around one customer and why it's important to sort of market in that way. So that's, again, it's that importance of understanding the value of the customer and the lifetime value of the customer, and to map it out.
There's a question from Claire in the chat as well, which is, you know, Accountability Plus offer a complete business services, but often get mistaken for accountants. And I'm going to guess that's because of the word accountability at the beginning. How, you know, any suggestions around how you can help change people's interpretation of the brand based on that word?
Yeah, the great thing about accountancy is a classic one, because many accountants, and this isn't a bad thing, and I'll talk about this in general, so I'm not doing this as a thing, but accountants can have a very fixed mindset about their offering and their product. And my very first introduction to business world is my accountant turned around and gave me all the bits and buts and wonderful stuff that he did. But very cleverly, he turned around and said, your tax bill would have been this year, this, but we've got it down to this. And by the way, here's our bill. Now, all of a sudden, I had a tax bill of, say, 20 grand. It was down to 5, and his tax bill of 4 doesn't look as bad anymore. It's just a clever way of looking and changing people's mind. But sometimes one of the challenges with service-based industries is they're very focused on what they know. Get someone outside of the picture to look at it. So a common thing, I had a concept with a law firm once, was he turned around and said to me, he said, I'm not sure people will accept business from people who aren't lawyers. In other words, he didn't believe he needed salespeople to sell law. And actually, because he's a lawyer, that's the way he was thinking. But I'd argue that, you know, solve their problems, solve what their problem is. You know, accountants don't look at the books and they make a business run efficiently. They make it run quick, slick. They find ways of finding income and how to grow your business. You know, so, you know, take yourself out of the box of what job it is that you do, and then look at it from that perspective. Look at it from the customer's perspective. Customer research is important, looking at it that way.
Yeah, and well, customer research kind of, you know, again, spent a lifetime doing this, which was going out and talking to customers to understand from their perspective what it looked like. For any, just as a small bit of background, my previous role was basically to compete against Microsoft. That was the whole job. Now, Microsoft is quite a big surface area, but the whole point around this is it wasn't just the conversations you can see, it was the conversations you could have with customers. So, you know, what does their team look like? What does their team do? What are they delivering at the moment? What are they talking about? So again, it's about, you know, making sure you keep that dialogue open. Somebody's putting their feedback as well. Customer feedback is a great selling tool. I'm going to say, if you can't trade off of referrals in today's social media market, and especially over competitive market, then I would really have a look at your business, purely and simply because You know, that is the one biggest competitive point that you have. The world is overly complicated. Humans hate decisions. So when somebody turns around to you and says, hey, John, I've just worked with these guys and they were amazing, actually price starts to become a bit of a slider versus risk, right?
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, the best form of marketing is word of mouth. You know, I mean, I can sit here and tell you there's all whizzy gadgets, but what is social media? It's just word of mouth. You know, if you're getting a problem with a product that you've been given, you know, nowadays people don't pick up the phone and talk to customer services. They actually go onto Twitter. Trust me, you'll get a faster answer if you complain on Twitter or Google than you would if you pick up the phone and try and talk to customer services. Because all of a sudden it's public, everybody knows about it. So all of a sudden they'll quickly jump on that, and it's the best way. You know, my wife recently had an example where she wasn't getting any use from the company she bought from. So every time they posted an ad, she'd just put a comment on the ad. And guess what? Got a response within 2 hours, you know, every time. So and we got the product resolved. So yeah, so, you know, looking at it from that perspective it's absolutely that. So, and obviously some of the stuff I've talked about is very generic, and obviously a lot of you will have specific areas and stuff, but marketing is important in all businesses, and I'd say more so in the businesses that are less fluffy than they are in the ones that are fluffy. So you know, when you look at manufacturing, engineering, a lot of people will say that they're not necessarily where you can use marketing, but there's very clever ways you can utilize it and do it, and it works well. And we've got lots of areas where it can work well, and sometimes you can get ideas from other industries. That's a key thing. That's where you can get that seems to be the norm.
Yeah, and on that basis, I'm conscious that we're 3 minutes towards the end of the session. Has anybody got any final questions just before we sort of close out for the day and I hand over to
I think there's one in the message if there isn't, but there's one in the message chat which is about using influencers.
Yeah, go for it. That's a great topic to close out.
So, right, the power of using influencers. Who here subscribes to Netflix? Most people? Yeah, there should be still a program on there called Fire. It's all about an event, and it used influencers. It's a fantastic way to use influencers, but it's also a fantastic way how to bomb and completely trash a business on that. Now, influencers are great in some areas and not in others, but again, it's key to get your strategy right and where you're looking at it from that, because there are a lot of people out there that will say, I'll charge you so many $1,000s and I will put your post out there. And you could spend a lot of money quickly. So have your strategy mapped out, and if that's a key part you want to use, then use it, you know, but always look at what you're going to get back. And on average, I always look at saying for every £1,000 you spend on marketing, you should get 6 back. It's a bold statement, but that's what you should be if you spend the money and get it sorted. So on that basis.
And it's like an engine of a car, right? You tune it, finely tune it over time in order to really understand it. With that, I think, John, are you there?
Yeah. Oh no, sorry.
Oh, sorry, wrong John.
John.
Yes, I am. Yeah, fine, thanks, Ollie.
So on that basis, hopefully there was some really good information. John will circulate your contact details around in the email that goes around afterwards if anybody wants a follow-up conversation to start to help with that strategy definition. Mr. Bridge, there's a lot going on.
There is, and a really useful session today. Some, really provoking thought ideas that have come out. So, John, we very much appreciate you being with us and taking the time to, as it were, stimulate our thinking going forward as we come out of a difficult period. Marketing is going to be quite key to make sure that we ourselves get ahead of the competition. So really appreciate that, and hopefully we can send your slides around to everybody that was on the call today, which I think will be a helpful aid memoir to them, and certainly will enable them. Because the key thing on being up to on today is it's great stimulating the thought, but it's putting it into action, which is the key. And let's hope that many people have got things that they can now put into action, which will make a real tangible difference to them as they go forward and as we drive forward to get our economy back on track and our businesses viable and successful once again. So thanks very much. It's been really, really useful. Do appreciate it. And thank you, Ollie, once again for hosting, which we also appreciate. So thanks to you both, and back to you, Ollie, to finalise.
Yeah, just thank you very much. There's 3 more sessions in the series. I'm going to call Sadie out on this. Thank you, Sadie, for arranging this. So Sadie is the unsung hero in the room, getting everybody on the call and pulling all the levers in the background. But yeah, there's 3 more in the series. If anybody's got any ideas about, you know, what they'd like to see, reach out directly as well. But with that, we'll circulate the recording with an email afterwards. And thank you very much for your time and have a great day.
Yeah, cool. And thank you everybody again for letting me come along. I'll share the slides. I'll send them over to Ollie and he can put them out. And a good book to read is They Ask, They Answer by Marcus Sheridan. That'll give you a good way of doing it. But thanks, Ollie.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Oh, perfect.
Bye.